Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beavermosh, and today I'm joined by David of Summoning the Lich, whose new album Under the Reviled Throne is coming out July 26th off of Prosthetic Records. David, thank you for joining me this afternoon. How are we doing?
Thanks for having me, Maddie. Doing pretty good. Had to take a shower real quick because
No worries.
got some stuff all over me taking care of my kid. But and then my alarm just I had it on silent, so I was like I got out of the shower. I had like 3 minutes. I was like throwing on clothes, but I'm good now. I'm here.
We did it. We did it. Well, David, I'm curious. Here you have Under the Reviled Throne coming out in a little less than about exactly a month now from the
Yeah,
moment of recording this. Um this is album, well, full length, number two. I know you've had some like demos and EPs before that, but I'm wondering, do you find the lead up for you putting out a sophomore album, does it feel different? Does it than it is than when you say you put out your debut? Like, how was that experience for you? Like, like the anticipation.
for sure. It's both different and the same. I think like a lot of the waiting has been familiar because we basically like when we got signed, we got signed by shopping our completed first album,
Mhm.
and so we got signed like 3 weeks before the pandemic hit. So then we
Wow.
had to, yeah. So then it basically everything got delayed. So the sense of just sitting and waiting is quite familiar. The difference though is that like fans actually have music to listen to and are excited for what we have to offer. So it's been a little easier, honestly. Aside from the fact that just the the end part of getting the album like mixed and stuff was just we had a lot of weird kind of struggles outside of pretty much everyone's control. There were just like some stuff that happened with our producer studio and all that kind of delays that are outside of our hands that they suck. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's just kind of part of making music. Like especially at this level, we don't have like $1 million album budget to just pump something out and smash it through no matter what.
Right.
So, and even those, you hear stories about those going crazy. So, I think recording and the process of releasing an album is just always a arduous, crazy, twisted path. And um, it's just exciting to finally be close to dropping it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, that fans now have music to listen to from you versus the last one, and I think about that too, because like there'll be bands that when they announce an album and I've heard their past music and I'm excited because I know I like this band and I'm anticipating, how they're gonna follow up music I already like. But when you're a band putting out your debut, you don't really have that advantage. You don't have people that have already built a familiarity with your music, know what to expect, or at least have an idea of what to expect. How do you build that anticipation for a debut record?
I mean, a lot of it was it was just us hoping. I mean, we had a small fan base,
Mhm.
but it was just us crossing our fingers and hoping it stuck and didn't get buried under all of the content that was coming out, especially around the time that we released that album. Um, and thankfully, people heard it and the fans dug it, and we've been slowly building that fan base since, and it's been humbling because it's like so many bands will put out amazing records that just like for whatever reason don't get heard. So the fact that like we had a team behind us to push it and the
Yeah.
fans were willing to post about it and say like, hey, we saw this like cool band, because that's where a lot of it comes from. Like a lot of it nowadays is just word of mouth from friends, especially with how hard it is to break through the algorithms. Like
Yeah.
yeah, the word of mouth thing is like more essential than ever.
So I've had bands on all parts of the spectrum on the show. I've had bands that are, signed to Metal Blade, and I have bands that are putting out music completely independent. And I think I hear the pros and cons of both, but like, definitely hearing the pros here that like a label like Prosthetic is able to kind of do that legwork for you, kind of like because people are familiar with them, they can like post about you and kind of like get your name into
Yeah,
like people's eyes.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just the network of connections that they've
Yeah.
established with their like publicist team, you know. It's
Mm.
like they know who to talk to and who to, you know, it's one of those things. It's not necessarily like, oh, there's a club and you have to be signed to get in the club, but it's more
Yeah.
like, you know, if you're like an editor for, you know, Metal Sucks and you get 100 bands a day sent to you, it's like the people that you know, those are the emails that you're obviously going to look at first, just because you're like, oh, hey, there's Becky from Prosthetic, or hey,
Yeah.
there's Will from Prosthetic. I'm going to check that out, and so that's, you know, that's where I found it's really advantageous, because I've done the independent metal music scene
Yeah.
thing with other bands, and you know, there are plenty of pros and cons to both, you know, to whatever you're doing. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do the thing, but that is definitely something I've noticed that's been just a huge
Yeah.
benefit to us, has been the label in that regard.
Well, as someone who's on that, media side, as you're talking about, I'm not a Metal Sucks editor, but like, maybe guilty is not the right word, but I definitely, when I took through my inbox of promos, I definitely tend to like prioritize the ones I'm already kind of familiar with or trust that I know, oh, they put out good music, or like they know
Yeah.
they're in the know, and I've had success with this contact or
And
this label before.
I think it's like a respect thing too. Like, you know, somebody who does care and like who understands the content that you're creating, right? They're
Mm,
going to send you um bands that they think you'll be interested in. So you'll know kind
100%,
of
yeah.
like, I can open this email and it's not just going to be like something completely out of my wheelhouse that I'm going to have to be like, "Hey, sorry, this isn't, you know, something I make content about, but, you know, keep pushing on," because
Yeah.
that's a lot of what all of us, you know, do in any sort of media creation roles, no matter what it, you know, what end it's coming from.
100%.
Uh, so yeah, I think that that's just kind of the nature of the game, and
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely helps.
Now, from what I understand, with this second record, you all as a band kind of made this decision to take the focus a little less off the technicality of this and make it more kind of about the hookiness of the song. What kind of led you to that decision?
It was kind of something that we started to lean towards about halfway through the writing process for United
Mhm.
in Chaos, because a lot of that was written really early on in the band's history, before we even were doing the full concept thing. Initially it was just going to be kind of like an anthology of fantasy based stories, and then I couldn't help myself, and I dove fully into it and kind of
Yeah.
modified those lyrics to be more world buildy. But uh but when we started, it was initially working with our original producer for that album, Matt Amlung. He did like Story of the Year's 10-year um, like remaster of,
Mm.
what's that album, The Swan or something like that. I can't remember. The one with the bird on it, but
Yeah.
there's Phoenix on it. But he did a lot of like major label stuff and kind of more pop structure oriented, and we all, you know, loved his input. And our guitarist Ryan had worked with him with every band he's ever been in, and you know, he was like, I like that you guys are kind of writing with like a bit more structure, like we should push this. And so that was a mentality that we kind of started to push and just continued to cultivate with our band. Our mantra kind of became everything in service to the song. And all of us listen to like a lot of stuff outside of, especially death metal, but outside of heavy music in general. Um, and so, you know, looking at things from like all angles, like we can still write extreme music and then focus more on the song structure and writing like songs that do hook and stuff, because I think that that's what we enjoy doing. And I think that it's not something that a lot of bands that have a bit of a technical sound necessarily gravitate towards, because a lot of times it's like push the technicality to 100%.
Yeah.
For us, it was like, hey, let's kind of focus a bit more on just writing bangers, you know, just fun songs that we can headbang to. They don't all have to be singles, you know, we still have deep cuts and stuff,
Yeah.
but we just want to make sure that the songs are really solid and that they're just good songs that
Yeah.
will last the test of time and not just be stuck in like an era.
As a metal listener, I hear what you're saying, and like for sometimes when I listen to a band that is super technical or more focused on texture, that's what I'm listening to. I'm not
Oh
really
yeah.
needing a song, like I want to hear like, what they can do with sound. That's interesting to me, but also like I
Oh,
get it.
100%.
Like there is times when I like a band like Black Dahlia Murder who is like making like hooks, but they're heavy. Like they are heavy hook laden songs. Like there's both. You could do both, and then both are equally acceptable
Yeah.
within death metal.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about death metal, right?
Yeah.
We got all these little like fingers and veins that spread out from the core of like the old school death metal that founded us all. And now you have tech death, and you have even like going into like genre blends like deathcore and all that kind of stuff. Like there's so many different routes that bands take. And I mean, like some of my favorite band, I have right above my head, I have a First Fragment flag. They're one of the shreddiest, most crazy, all over the place sounding, but like very like neoclassical technical death metal, like pushing it to the absolute max. But a lot of those guys are in other bands that don't sound like First
Yeah.
Fragment. Like, Nick is on guitar. He's the bass player for Unleash the Archers. So, yeah, and that's power metal. That just
Yeah, yeah,
straight up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, that's a lot. You find that a lot more than you would
Yeah.
think within this genre, especially just because it's like, I mean, death metal is a ton of fun, but there's just a lot of other music out there, and it's
Yeah.
not the most profitable genre in the world. So like
Yeah.
career musicians a lot of times have, they're dabbling elsewhere too.
I kind of I remember I was on Twitter and I don't know why this tweet stuck out to me because I read a lot of tweets because I'm on Twitter a lot, but Undeath was doing like a little Q&A on Twitter and they were asking, what's an artist you like that people would expect? They're like, we love Charlie XCX. I'm like, of course you do. That makes so much sense. I
Yeah,
cannot.
those Undeath boys. We love the Undeath. Actually, our newest music video for the song "Return to the Soil," our new guitarist Muck, he's playing a BC Rich Warlock, a white one that's missing like a bridge pickup and it's got like a Floyd on it, and
Yeah.
that's actually one of the guitarists from Undeath's old guitar that Nick.
No way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those dudes are our boys. We love those dudes.
Was it just like did you buy it off of them? How did
But
you
he
get?
bought it off of him. Yeah, he just hit him up and was like, "Yo, that guitar's sick. If you're ever looking to sell it." And then like a few months later, he was like, "Yo, dude, I'm looking to get rid of this thing." He was like, "Bet," and bought it. Good deal. Homie deals and stuff. And that's the way it goes.
Yeah. When I saw Undeath a little probably over a year ago now, they had a stage dive competition. They had people just jump on the stage and whoever did the best, most creative stage dive, they just gave a free t-shirt to. It's like
That's
that's
sick.
fun. Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, and
Um
I love that. I love bands bringing, I like both sides. Like I love bands that bring the whole scary aspect to death metal. I think that needs to remain like a thing. But then I think we also need the bands that are just like out to have a good time. That balance is what like makes a scene what it is.
mhm. um we got into it a little bit, but I get the impression that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that you're not a band that is super concerned about micro genres, what you fall into. But because I've seen with your band, you've been labeled mellow death. I've seen people label you tech death. Do you have a preference of what people think your band is?
No, because we don't pay attention to it. Like we're just writing
Yeah.
songs, right? And so it's like all of us grew up um with some kind of like core background.
Hmm.
So like that's like the one thing that we try not to do because regardless of our intention, it's going to bleed through. So it's like if we tried to have core elements, we would just be a deathcore band. So like we're trying to do the death metal thing. The little bits of core elements that come through are just like the natural ingrained choices that we're going to make regardless, just because that was what we were brought up
Yeah.
on. But like we just try and write, we just think death metal, fantasy death metal. Like that's what I call it, fantasy death metal. And like a
Yeah.
lot of it's like trying to reflect more on the vibe we're trying to give than like stick to a specific genre, right? So yeah, I don't care about genres personally. I know it's hey, some people love to gatekeep their genres, and that's I get there is validity to that. Otherwise it's not a genre. But um, yeah, for me it's like I'm tossing it all in the blender.
I like. I like the existence of like very specific genres just because it makes my brain happy to categorize things. But I think
Yeah,
like
yeah.
being dogmatic about it is
To be
very
able to put pins and everything. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I definitely get that. And that's like the biggest struggle I think for, or not the biggest struggle. That's the biggest struggle with like naming and like kind of like being specific with like what we are and like trying to pitch to people like, oh,
Yeah.
pitching us for a tour. It's like, oh, well, what kind of music are they? It's like death metalish, you know. So there's definitely, there's some validity to that. Like we as people, I think, like to be able to put labels and like organize things because it helps us just file everything in our brain palace.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, I mean like Obituary and In Flames are two very different bands. And
Yeah,
it's helpful to have a little bit of a characterization in front of death metal for the two bands. So like okay, yeah, these are they're both death metal, but they do a different way of doing death metal.
yeah, and I think a good example of like of genre like labeling having failed is metalcore, right?
Sure.
Because metalcore has been so many different things over the last decade and a half. Like we went with like the Gothenburg influenced metalcore that was coming out in like the late 90s, early 2000s to mid 2000s. Then everything kind of shifted into that, what, the 2010, where everything was like kind of deathcore, kind of metalcore, and then now metalcore is like very new metal influenced, and we're seeing like kind of a new era of metalcore in that regard, and more pop influence too. So and I think it's funny that it's all named metalcore, and I think it's kind of a disservice, right, to have to
Yeah.
not have a more specific genre. So I do agree there, and I think that that's like, you know, yeah, I don't know. I can't bring myself to do it. I just want to be the Lady Gaga of death metal talking about like goblins and stuff. Like I want to write just pop hooks and then have all the lyrics be about my crazy fantasy world.
Well, if we want to bring in metalcore, like even like the initial use of that word was describing bands like Earth Crisis, who have
Yeah, who
nothing to
are
do with like
yeah.
Killswitch Engage. Yeah,
Yep, and they're like, now it would just be hardcore, right? And
right.
and I mean, like, but even Killswitch Engage, like based on like how things are now, Killswitch Engage's Alive or Just Breathing is basically on current terms like hardcore. If Knock
Sure.
Loose can be hardcore, then that album could be hardcore too. Maybe nothing beyond it. But like I think that's what's so fun about this genre too, is that we can also we could sit here for like 10 hours arguing, or not arguing, but conversing about like the logistics of like what bands fall under what categories. And like there's not, maybe like EDM and rap are like the two other genres I can think of where people are like that passionate about stuff in that regard, and just the whole aspect of the, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's basically those two genres. So
Oh,
I think that's fun.
oh my God. This is a story I haven't told before, but when I did I did my college internship at this theater. I don't know how I got this internship. I just found an internship and I needed an internship credit. And it was like they were like an EDM specific like concert venue. I don't like EDM at all, but I got and like having the people that like the promoters like that I was like working under like try to like describe, oh, this is like new house or this is dubstep and all these words of like this is what it must sound like to non-metalheads to like have us describe
Yeah.
this. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's what's so crazy. It's like, and we don't think about that there are a couple other genres that do that, but I think it's definitely like EDM and hip hop and rap are like the two other ones that like ride real hard with like genre defining lines.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
It's
fun.
it can be, yeah. Now, you described yourself as fantastical death metal, which is interesting because I usually associate like fantasy with like either like Dio style heavy metal or like power metal. I don't really associate it with death metal, but
Yeah.
you're kind of breaking the mold there.
I just think it's fun, It's
Yeah.
it's stuff I've always wanted to write. I do listen to some power metal, and I love Dio,
Hmm.
and uh and I think that a lot of it too is just like if you're trying to write the best thing that you can write, you're gonna write what you know best. And there are plenty of other vocalists that are gonna write like horror based lyrics, or they're going to write like they're like, the world is fucked up, and those kind of, the cattle decap style lyrics
Yeah.
where it was just like misanthropic and very. And I think that they do an amazing job, and plenty of bands are, and they do a better job than I would ever do, right?
Hmm.
So for me, like I grew up, I was a kid on the playground at recess where everybody else is playing on the playground, and I'm sitting there writing like Scooby Doo fan fiction, at like 7 years old.
Yeah.
So like I've always been into fantasy and spooky stories and like ghouls and goblins and magic and ghosts and and I grew up reading Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and getting into things like Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune, like early on, even like honestly before I probably was old enough to like really digest what it was, which is why I've had to reread that
Yeah.
book like 3 times. Um, but I think like all like going into that and all the anime I watch, and all the fantasy movies we grew. I mean, I
Yeah.
grew up like 1999. I would have been 8 years old going with my parents to see Lord of the Rings in the theater. So that like
Yeah.
was in my blood and baked into me forever. Um, so yeah, I just couldn't resist. And when I had the opportunity to do it, I was like, why not? Most people don't even listen to these lyrics anyways, and and I try and make the choruses hooky enough that it doesn't
Yeah.
matter like what it's like they're fun and catchy. It's not like a whole bunch of weird fantasy words that you can't grasp onto.
Yeah.
Um, I leave that for the verses.
Yeah. Well, you kind of answered my next question a little bit, but I was going to ask you, you're a band that really kind of appreciates lore. Um, and I was going to see like what sources. I know you are a Lord of the Rings fan. I know you're interested in like Dungeons and Dragons. Where
Yeah.
is there any like other key places where you're picking up inspiration for the
Oh.
storytelling?
So much. For me, there's so many. It's tons of different animes. One of the big ones is Adventure Time, obviously. World of Warcraft, and Warcraft 3. Like Warcraft, I got into the Warcraft universe with Warcraft 3, so that was like my big entry into that. And honestly, the game I probably enjoyed the most because it was real time strategy, um, but it also introduced me to that world, which got me into WoW. But then like Madoka Magica, Soul Eater. Um, I'm trying to think. Ergo Proxy. There are definitely animes that I've leaned heavily, just as heavily on as things like Tolkien. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm writing a book that is the like actual lore, right? That will tell the full story because you can only tell so much with lyrics. I'm
Hmm.
hoping to have it done around the time that we'll drop the third album. Um, really hard. I was like, yeah, I'll have it done, and yeah, it's just writing a book is way harder than I gave it credit for. But um, I think I'm gonna put like on the front page. I'm just gonna list like an entire page of just all my influences because like I wear them on my sleeve anyways. I have
Yeah.
references to them in the lyrics. I mean the first song on United in Chaos is "The Nightmare Begins," which is also the name of the first episode of Invader Zim. So and that it's like I love leaving Easter eggs and little references
Yeah.
to the properties I love and that I grew up with and that inspired me and influenced me and those are the ones that shaped my preference of storytelling and my tastes. So
Yeah.
I see no reason. I'm not some prolific author that's going to just create 15 languages or something crazy. So why not just wear my influences on my sleeve? It's a lot more fun
Yeah.
that way.
You hit the button. I always love when bands hit the button and they bring up video games because I love chatting video games with bands. You have a WoW background, huh?
Yeah, some.
Yeah.
I got in kind of late um on the OG. I played Wrath of the Lich King and I played Burning Crusades and then I fell off and then I came back for Mists of Pandaria.
Yeah.
and then I fell back off again just due to like I was like I can't I don't have the time. I don't have the time to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and then a lot of it too is my buddy that I played with quite a bit. Like that was kind of when he started to get real frustrated with the franchise. The bass player of my old band, Joey, he has like over 4 years in game time, so he is a committed long-term WoW player. But when he's sitting there posting every day like, "Oh, this sucks," I'm like, maybe I'll play some of my other games. But yeah, I mean, I even like games like I grew up like Fallout New Vegas.
Yep.
Like
Of course.
I mean, I played the hell out of that game. I played so much New Vegas. I have it on my Steam Deck. I'm gonna be going through it again. I just picked up a new campaign like a week or two ago, but I've been bouncing around games because I've got into like handhelds, like emulation handhelds
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff. So I've just been everything from Chrono Trigger to playing like Rush 2049 on the N64 and like all
Amazing.
my favorite games.
I I never got into World of Warcraft, but I am a avid, specifically old school RuneScape player. So I
Nice.
am very familiar with the MMO grind and the MMO community getting frustrated in games going a different direction. That is
Old
something
school
I.
RuneScape is a great example. That's yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you guys still have old school RuneScape. Like
Yeah.
that's a thing. That's sick. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. The comedian's like, no, you give us our old game back. Now we're
yeah,
leaving.
like you're gonna lose half your player base at least.
Yeah,
It's like, oh no. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that is a player base that stood their ground though too.
yeah.
My wife played like EverQuest and RuneScape like when she was younger quite a bit, and then now it's just like Animal Crossing. Man, that took her. She has like thousands of hours into Animal Crossing New
Yeah.
Horizons. It's
Uh,
tight.
I I just now started playing Red Dead Redemption 2. I've never played it, and
I haven't played it yet either.
I wasn't so like I was like because I beat Baldur's Gate 3 like around Christmas. I'm like I can't mentally commit to like a big RPG again. I need to give some space, but then like I picked up Red Dead Redemption 2. I was like, what the hell have I been waiting for? Like I'm so invested now.
That's
I'm
so
like
sick.
I'm like 20 hours in on my Steam like logged in time, and I've made like no progress in the main story. Like I'm just like going around exploring. It's like this is so sick.
Yeah, I'm gonna the Red Dead and actually Baldur's Gate 3 is another one just because I have a 5-year-old kid and then I do the band and just started a new job and all that kind of stuff. So everything's been like wild on my front lately and I have this list of games. It's like I just keep buying them and then they just sit and I'm like, I'll play it one day. One day.
Yeah. Oh, I just
Um,
wait till like the Steam sales that are when games are
mhm.
like ridiculous, like $2,
Tomorrow.
and it's like, yeah, tomorrow. And I'm just
Tomorrow.
gonna stock up and then have games lined up for like the next year that I'll eventually get to.
Yep. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing too. I have my list. I have a like a because I'm old. I have like a paper written list of the games that I'm like, all right, I got to look for these during the Steam summer sale and get as many as I can that I think are like, all right, that's a good enough
Yeah.
deal for me to strike.
Oh my God. A couple weeks ago, I bought Civ 6 for $2.
That's insane. Oh,
Yeah.
I miss the Civ games. I haven't played Civilization in forever.
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably been like it might be over 10 years now.
Yeah.
I need to I got to pick that back up. Well,
Yeah.
I know what I might be doing tonight. Yeah.
Sorry if I made your plans for you tonight.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was actually like, I was like, man, what if I told myself I was gonna work until a certain time, and then I was gonna spend the rest of the night just because I need to give myself some time to breathe. And I was trying to decide what game I wanted to play tonight when everybody's already gone to bed and everything. It's gonna be Civilization. It is.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Uh,
Civ 7's coming out, I think, next year. So
ooh, I'm glad they're still. I feel like there was a while there where it was just kind of slept on. Like, was it Civ? Between Civ 4 and 5 or between 5 and 6? I can't remember. There was like a big gap.
Yeah. They like the dude takes his time. The
Yeah,
dude
but I
takes
mean
his time.
the games are great, so
Hmm.
you know, take your time.
Cool. Well, let's get back into your band now, shall we?
Yeah.
What take me back. What was the origin of this band? Did you already know each other? Did y'all some maybe meet at a show and realize you were all into the same music and nerdy stuff? Or was it just like kind of
Yeah.
like yeah.
So it was our guitarist Ryan was kind of the person to get it all together. He was just kind of writing a lot of death metal style riffs and wanted to basically he approached all of us kind of separately. So the way he approached me was, I'm looking to do like a meat and potatoes kind of death metal esque band, not like just writing what we want to write, not really caring too much about being specific genre wise. And I think it would be fun if we did it about fantasy stuff. And I know that you like fantasy stuff. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, you got me. I do like all those things. We really don't have like a ton of shared taste musically, as at least as
Interesting.
far as like heavy music is concerned. Like a lot of us kind of have like our bands that we listen to. The big bands that we all kind of share are that we shared before the band was a thing was like Job for a Cowboy. We all grew up with like Through the Eyes of the Dead, the Faceless. So
Of
like
course.
a few other bands like that. But even the Black Dahlia Murder, like I had slept on them until really we had started kind of jamming this stuff because when I was younger, I saw them. Well, I grew up in like a very like Christian household, right? So like the Christian metalcore scene was more like what I was into when I was growing up, and like anything that was too like Satan was like just a bit too extreme. It wasn't like I couldn't listen to it. My parents weren't like that way, but it was just like I just it was scary to me basically.
Yeah.
And then I grew up and got away from that kind of stuff, and and now and yeah, and opened my mind and yeah, so he was like, "Hey, I saw them on a bill with Cradle of Filth. That was what it was. I saw them on a bill with Cradle of Filth, and I was
A
just like,
very not Christian band.
yeah, you know what I mean. So it was just like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm probably not into that. And then I just didn't check it out. Like even when I was like beyond that train of thought, like I just like, you just forget to look at a band that you saw 10 years ago. So he was like, dude, you made a mistake. You need to listen to the Black Dahlia Murder. And then he was like, listen to Nocturnal, and then just go up from there. And so I did, and I listened to the whole discography in like 2 days, and I was like, man, what have I been missing? So that's definitely another band that all of us love, but I can't claim that I loved that band until really we started. Unfortunately, it's like on the one hand, it's like I hate missing out on music, and you hate like missing out on that music, but then on the other hand, you get like when that happens, you get like a surprise package of a band with this great discography. That's also cool. So I don't
Yeah.
have any complaints. I love him now. I got to see Trevor, I got to see him live. So
Hell yeah.
yeah. So
Rest in
I'm
peace.
happy. Yeah, rest in peace for sure. Um
Um,
but so yeah, that was basically the beginning of the band, and that was how he kind of did it. He got us all together that way. TJ and I had been in our drummer had been in a band before, like a beat down hardcore band.
okay.
And then Ryan and I had kind of jammed in like a punk hardcore, like a hardcore, like a comeback kiddish kind of hardcore-ish band
Of course.
um, that never came to fruition. But we had written some stuff for that, um, and we had all we've been in bands in the area. Like I moved here in 2006, and I was immediately looking for a band because I was in bands back in Georgia since 2000. I've been playing music since 2003 live, since I was like 12 or whatever. So
Yeah.
um, it's been yeah, it's just we all knew each other, and it was just really Ryan was the catalyst. He just pulled the trigger and got us all together, and the rest just kind of snowballed from there.
I it's so funny because we have a similar background because my parents were Pentecostal ministers. So I am
Nice. Okay.
very I know a
Yeah.
lot of those. I at least even if I didn't really listen to them, know a lot of the names of those Christcore bands you're probably referencing. Impending Doom,
Yeah.
Becoming the Archetype.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I got one up here. Let's see if I can which way is it? Yeah, right there. So right here is with Blood Comes Cleansing.
oh, yep,
And that's
yep.
their vinyl reap. So that was the first band I ever played live with in December of 2003 when they were still a
Wow.
local band in Atlanta. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I mean, Southern Baptist. So it was like that was the
Yeah.
upbringing. Yeah.
There was a time, and I don't really know how it happened, but like, well, if you think of like the Warped Tour, it was just a church service. It
Oh,
was like the Devil
it
Wears
was
Prada, For Today, and Under Oath.
yeah, they had Cornerstone's heyday. I went to Cornerstone 2007, and there were like 94,000 people there, or something insane. It was like, man, that scene was booming. But also that's where the money is, right? Because you have that embedded base because like parents will,
Yeah.
just give your kids money and be like, "Hey, they're Christian bands." And you know, there's there's a lot of fun, wild, not fun stuff going on behind the scenes during those scenes, I'm sure. And
I've heard those stories. I'm sure a handful of bands were sincere, and I'm sure a handful of bands were bullshitting.
it was so like our producer, Jack Daniels is still in the band War of Ages. They're like one of the
Yeah.
few like kind of Christ metalcore bands. And those dudes are like, real legit good dudes who like just have their personal faith. They're also like super loving, like caring. They're just good people. And
Yeah.
that's just like their faith and they're gonna do that and that's cool. Lots of other bands just in it for the money and in it to be creepy and yeah, but unfortunately that just comes with the territory. Any
Yeah.
position of power seems to be a magnet for creepos.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
Sucks.
what the hell.
Yeah,
Um
it's like, what do we
I
do to stop it?
I always thought it was so uncomfortable to watch when some of those Christian bands would like give their sermon like at the
Mm.
end of the set. Like,
Oh yeah, for today.
why for today? Like, no, people came to hear music. Like, you could talk about this, but like, there's no need for an altar call at a metal show. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But hey, whatever.
If
Maybe
you're
some
at
people
like
like this.
yeah, if you're at like a Christian festival or something, whatever. But
Yeah.
like they would do it in like on tour with like normal bands, and it's like, dude, you guys are playing 17 minutes of your 30-minute set, and then the rest is just you up there like preaching. You're doing the opposite of what you're like. If like your goal is to like reach people and tell them blah blah blah, like all people are doing is wanting you to shut up and play some music right now.
Yeah.
Like you're not doing yourself any favors or your message or whatever you're trying to get across. Because like,
Mhm.
yeah, but you know, people will people do that with other stuff too with bands. So it just seems to be like the Christian crowd was like way into like let's make half our set not music.
Yeah, but like everyone knows that like calorie decapitation is all about like veganism, and that's fine. But do you see them like doing like spending like half their set, like bringing people up like here,
No,
become vegan? Yeah,
they just write lyrics and then they have like sick album artwork of cows pooping humans. It's like
yeah, yeah,
like I feel like that was still more effective than anything a lot of
yeah,
those other bands ever did. It's like
yeah.
that does not make me want to eat meat.
uh, well, you're a band that has toured with a couple pretty big hitters, Gorod and Ferre. Do you have any touring plans coming up for this record, especially now that you've built your audience?
We're trying.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of. It's hard. Like the tour market right now is super saturated.
Hmm.
Lots of good tours going out, and lots of competition. So it's just like a lot of us trying to bid on, like not bid on, but like what was it? Submit for tours, right? So
Sure.
that's the way the process goes. Basically, like ex booking agents, like, hey, I have this tour with okay, I'm trying to think of some okay, the Flesh God Apocalypse, that's one that just got announced, right?
Mhm.
I have this Flesh God Apocalypse Shadow of Intent co-headliner tour and we're looking for support, and they'll send that to like all the booking agents, and then the booking
Okay.
agents will then send that booking agent the band or bands that they think are like their best offering, and then the main agent putting together the tour looks at all the submissions they get from the other agents, and they go from there. And a lot of it too is like, we don't know, we're a newer band, right? So we don't know everybody in the scene, and a lot of it's like, if you get 5 bands and then you ask the band, hey, we got these 5, we cut it down to these 5 or these 3 bands, and then they know people in one of the bands, it's like, obviously that's going to be the band that they're going to want to bring along. So,
Of course.
you're, as a newer band, you're always fighting against stuff like that. And that's just the nature of the business. And that's
Yeah.
the nature of any business like this. So unfortunately, I can't say that we have anything definitely locked yet, but we do have a lot of feelers out and a lot of stuff
Yeah.
potentially in the works. We're also going to be writing. The last album we didn't really take like time, like take actual chunks of time to focus on writing. So we're going to really this summer kind of focus on getting some material written, so that next year we can take that material and everything that we've written between then and probably next winter, and kind of hone it and turn it into our third album towards the end of next year.
Are you a band that has or is interested in the prospect of like hopping on like the festival circuits, or is that kind of not your deal?
I'd love to. Yeah, we need to. It's
Yeah.
something that we need to do. We just haven't. It's same thing. I think we haven't done a ton of festivals, so our
Hmm.
name are not really uh like out there for that kind of stuff. And I'm hoping that with this next album and with us touring on it for this next year, that we can really push for like some 2025, like really stack. I'd like to do like a spring tour and then just mainly hit festivals next summer, especially because
Yeah.
like a lot of us, like for our jobs, for our day jobs, like the summer is kind of the busy season. So being able to like tour like springs
Yeah.
and falls just fits better with like our lifestyle overall.
I think festivals are good for great for newer bands. Like for like the last festival I went to, for example, I tried to go see a band that was, that I wasn't like it wasn't like a must see, but they were like a band I liked, and I went and I got there, and it was like, oh, I'm way in the back, and it doesn't really, I'm not really engaged with this because I'm like so out of there. I'm gonna go on this side stage and check out this other band, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever done that at a festival, and I'm sure like
Oh yeah.
was like so like it's a way to like reach an audience that you weren't actively like promoting to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's definitely the idea. We were trying to get on
Yeah.
our boys in Necrogoblicon last year got on the Gathering of the Juggalos. So I know that's
Oh,
something we were submitted for this year.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
don't know if we had don't I don't know if we got on it,
Yeah.
uh but we toured with them last year when they did like a week around the Gathering of the Juggalos, and that was also really cool because those guys are kind
Yeah.
of on another level, and they also bring a lot of um they it's a show, right?
Right.
Something we try and do when we play live is like I try and make it a show. I have like I talk about the lore and I try and put it like in universe and make it maybe bring a little more than just us going up there and playing a set.
Yeah.
Necrogoblicon, I mean they now, especially now that they have now that the goblins singing up there, um like it's and they have Dickie Allen. It's like it's crazy. They're just gonna keep launching into the stratosphere, that band.
Um, so you've created this world, Arias on your first album, and this record, from what I understand, it's kind of a sequel in that story.
Yeah.
You care to maybe give a preview or maybe a trailer for those who don't understand what Arias is and what that kind of brings?
Yeah, so Arias is just the name of like the planet, the name of the world. The first album takes place primarily in the lands of Rodor. Um, a few hundred years before the story takes place, there was a great battle, and the druids, who were basically created by the bog. Think of the bog as like the celestial beings that created this and all universes. Um, they were created to kind of shepherd mankind as essentially one of their many experiments in these little bubble universes they create. And the druids helped mankind survive this great battle against evil. And they to do so, though, they had to forge a sword with a lot of their power um, in order to cast this being into the void, like a separate parallel dimension. And they then bestowed that sword to the king of Rodor as a symbol of good faith, that they are not trying to domineer man and are simply here to assist. And mankind and the king, in his fear of the power that he had seen from the druids, then ran the sword through the leader of the druids, killing him. Druid order disbands, and that is essentially the what brings forth the Lich. After a few hundred years of just all of that animosity boiling up, the Lich has found a way to both bring immortality to himself and unleash a whole slew of creatures and evil and this force of madness and chaos. So it's like an actual ethereal force that opens from this gate, right? He opens a gate that brings in all these monsters, but then also this force of darkness that basically infects anybody who has that seed of evil and causes it to proliferate and grow. So the Lich in album 1 becomes the Lich from the Druid, and rips his soul out and binds it to a phylactery and reanimates his own corpse with his intelligence bound to it. And then is leading what the humans have deemed they call the sin, right, which are just these beings from this other world and then they basically just lay waste to Rodor. The whole reason the Lich did this initially was to get back at Rodor. But as him and all Liches do, they fall to the madness of being soulless, right?
Yeah.
They're just an intelligence bound to a rotting corpse, essentially, and that madness begins to really take hold, and the anger and the sense of vengeance turns into just a sense of evil and destruction. He no longer wishes to just balance the scales, but he is now on the mission to destroy all that is good and that would stand against the forces of chaos and madness within all of Arias. So this next album, under the under the Reviled Throne, is him moving through the wastes, which is basically the desert lands in between Rodor and the nation of Bastel, which is a seafaring nation. They basically mainly focus on building ships and commerce to other continents. They have this gigantic constructed wall that runs along the entire mainland, and then they just live along the coast. And so that wall hasn't been breached in a couple hundred years. So they've kind of fallen to complacency. And so the Lich makes his way through the wastes, and this album is him basically doing some serious damage to Bastel in his quest to gain the ships to then spread out and conquer all of Arias.
That's awesome. And when I hear that, I hear so many points, right? Like there are so many like characters or places that like when you write your third or fourth or fifth album, you have so many places to like tell more of the story. You can kind of like, do I want to focus on this character or that character or this part of the world? Like that's like you've left it very open for that.
Yeah, I wrote a ton of stuff like in the background, and I think
Yeah.
one of the hardest parts with the music is just deciding like what is told with the little bit of lyrical content that I have to tell. And that's why I'm working on the book, because I have like, it's pages and pages and pages and pages of lore, and I have just like web graphs to keep myself organized on how certain plot points go and how certain characters are and their attributes, and just so that I can try and keep a cohesive story going. And I mean, like, it's changed even from when I was writing the first album. So it's like a lot of like character correction and me going back and forth and like making sure I'm not contradicting myself and something that
Yeah.
I've like written previously and that I'm not like taking a character somewhere it wasn't supposed to go initially. Um, it's more difficult than other projects I've done, but it's also a lot more fun for me. So I enjoy writing all the fantasy stuff.
Yeah. Does world building and writing stories through lyrics, is that as important for you creatively as the music behind it?
Yeah, I think so for me, right? The
Yeah.
other guys, it's like all of us are nerds in our own right, like, but they're like I'm definitely the fantasy nerd. For Ryan, like he is like movie fantasy. So it's like for him it's like Harry like in books, but like Harry Potter is like huge for him and Lord of the Rings. Um for Muck, like Muck is like a huge nerd when it comes to stuff like WWE.
Hell
So
yeah.
he's like you know, he knows he'll just go and rattle. I mean, he's got shirts from like 97 this and he's like, oh dude, you see this, god, this shirt was, I'm just like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I love your passion.
Yeah.
um and you know, I love wrestling, but that dude, like, he know, and it's not just that, but and then our drummer, he's a big video game nerd when it comes to like especially like the PS2, like really Genesis through PS2 era. Like he's got some of those games. Like he could probably go up against like some of the best of the best. I've watched him speed run Star Fox, and it's like better than YouTube speed runs. It's insane. Um, and DDR, dude's like a really good at DDR. But I mean, drummer things, you know, so
Yeah.
that makes a bit more sense. But you know, so we all have our own kind of nerdiness, but like none of them, like, I don't even know how much of the lyrics they read, honestly. Like they just because it's not like that's definitely my thing.
Mhm. Speed running, watching that breaks my brain. I
I
don't
don't
understand it.
I don't
I
know.
yeah.
I don't know. I can't game like that. That is not
Yeah.
my style of gaming.
No, I don't get it. Realizing that a game that took me, I beat Hollow Knight recently, a game that took me, I think like, 30 hours to beat, and that's like normal, that's the average. Realizing there are people who have beat the game in 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
don't get that. I don't understand that.
just
That doesn't make any sense to me.
just hunting for crazy exploits. I'm just like, how do you
Yeah.
find these things? Like the backwards jump in Mario
Oh yeah.
64, like up the stairs. Ugh.
Nope.
I did. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not on that level.
Nope.
Nowhere near it.
Nope. But I'm sure some people here Yingwei Malmsteen are like, what the how are you doing that with a guitar? But like, there are people who just like find a craft and just take it to a crazy extreme, and like,
Yeah, I just, yeah, I mean, it's like virtuosos, but with every medium, right? You just have
yeah,
these people that just take it to a level that's like almost gross. Like you're just
yeah,
like, oh, like how?
yeah,
Just imagining the amount of effort. Like I'd be 80 before I would ever figure that one thing out, and this guy managed to do it, and he's like 17 years old on YouTube. I'm like,
yeah.
okay, bigger brains than mine.
When I watch like other RuneScape players, like there are professional RuneScape players. Um,
RuneScape, I mean, people take that. I think RuneScape might be one of the most like serious player bases as far as like you got a lot of players that are taking it like that is their like
yeah.
they do their life, their normal life is to facilitate the ability to RuneScape, right?
Yes. Just
Yeah.
seeing what some people have, how people have learned to manipulate the game engine and just take advantage of new players on like PvP. Like you, it is a sport at this point. It is insane.
Yeah, I mean it's people's lives. But
Yeah.
then it's like, hey, whatever you're finding enjoyment from, right? As long as you're enjoying it. The problem is a lot of people that get that far are like, I hate this game. I hate it
Yeah.
so much. It's like, well, then why are you doing it?
Yeah. Well, we're getting kind of we've been out at this for an hour almost, but before I let you go, I am curious. You are a St. Louis metal band, and I'm
Mhm.
like, just out of curiosity, what is the St. Louis metal scene like?
St. Louis metal scene is cool. It's not
Yeah.
the biggest, like especially because I mean we're a small major city, right? Like population wise, downtown is only like 300,000 people. It's a much
Mhm.
bigger suburb. But then the further out you go, the harder it is to get kids out to shows. Um, so I'd say like we're like a medium city. It's definitely getting better though. There was a period where the scene was a little weird, and then it was starting to really recover, and then the pandemic hit, and so like every scene's been recovering since then.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of cool bands. We have actually I'm wearing a shirt. They just they're no longer this band. They were called Blackwell. They're coming out with like a new band. They're the rebranding. They're the younger kids, so they're kind of trying to take it more seriously, I think, with the new band. But lots of good budding musicians, and then we have some bands Storm Ruler. They're um, like Dark Souls themed black metal. They're on
Hmm.
Napalm. And we have bands like Fister. They're like in the more doom kind of doom-esque
Yeah.
bands, or the Gorge. They're like progressive, pulverizing
Yeah.
awesomeness. I don't even know what to call the Gorge. Check out the Gorge. They're cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we have and then we have a lot of bands are doing like we have a lot of metalcore bands, and we have some bands like Discrepancies doing like the rap metal thing that are like kind of doing like something kind of unique in their own take on it, which is cool.
Yeah.
Like really riding the lines between like the pop and rap metal stuff. So yeah, I mean like it varies. Lots of kids look forward to coming out to shows. Some shows just surprise the hell. We had like almost 900 kids out for Necrogoblicon and Inferi on like a Tuesday night, which like for St. Louis that's like not a normal thing.
Yeah.
So it's definitely nice to see it recovering after the pandemic. We're doing good. We just
Yeah.
just gotta hang in there. It's hard because we don't have like tons of tours don't route through here. We had like a theft ring too that like spooked a bunch of people for a while, but
Hmm.
they caught those
Uh,
guys.
I I know what it's like to live in a smaller major city. I'm in Minneapolis, so like the Twin
Okay.
Cities.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so like but it's surprising that like with that I like it because it's like there are bands in these two cities, and because it's not a huge city, like the scene is really tight knit. Like everyone knows who the metal bands of
Yeah.
Minneapolis and St. Paul is, and I think that's cool. Whereas like New York, there are just so many bands.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And I mean, like you can. It's like on the one hand, you can just like play places like New York or LA, and like you could be in a band and play there like 10 times a month and never play to like barely the same crowds. But
Mhm.
at the same time, like you're cutting through a lot more noise, like a lot more noise for anyone to notice you because there are just tons of artists there. So I think there is like I think it's easier when you're committed and like you're honing your craft and you're improving and writing good
Mhm.
music. It's easier to shine when you're in like a place like St. Louis or Minneapolis or yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the others like I mean even like Nashville because like Nashville
Mhm.
doesn't pump out like a ton of death metal like obviously
Mhm.
being such a country based scene like they
Yeah.
like so bands like in Fury and Demon King and uh I know the Entheos folks live there. It's like
Mhm.
bands tend to plus like cities like that are cool because they're music cities, right? St.
Yeah.
Louis is a big like blues city. And we had Chuck Berry. I mean, unfortunately we had Chuck Berry,
Mhm.
but also we had Chuck Berry who
Yeah.
set up like a lot of music stuff in
Yeah.
the city, which was good. Um, so yeah, so I think it's a benefit and a curse. It's like I wish more shows came through here, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like I like the tight knit community that we have, and I like that I can go to
Mhm.
shows and know people, and that our fans are really like they care, but they also know that we care, and we make it out to shows that we can. For like I have a kid, so it's like harder for me to make it. But I mean, our guitarist
Mhm.
Ryan, he's out at like every show, dude. He
Mhm.
really tries to make it out, not because like we're trying to save face or whatever, but just because we do care and like
Mhm.
it's our scene and if kids aren't coming out to shows here, then the scene dies, and it happens to cities.
Yeah.
So, it's
Um,
important to support.
yeah, I guess you're right. The disadvantage is like a lot of tours just skip Minneapolis, and it sucks. But like, um, it is what it is because and sometimes they don't. I saw Judas Priest in Minneapolis,
Yeah,
a
that's
month ago.
sick.
Yeah,
That's so sick. That's a bucket list show for me. I need to
yeah.
see Judas Priest.
No, they were fantastic. I cannot believe Rob Halford could still hit those
Oh,
killer highs.
I know. I see videos and I'm like this, and I can tell too that it's like him singing. It's not like a backtracker
Mhm.
because he's singing, right? And
Yeah,
it's not, doesn't even have auto tune running on the track. And those little imperfections are like what make it sound good
yeah,
anyways for something like that. You don't want like Painkiller auto tuned would. I'd need painkillers afterwards.
yeah.
It would bum me out.
um, you're right about like music cities. Like Minneapolis may not be like the go-to metal city. Like we're not Portland. We're not like Tampa. But there is Minneapolis is known for like I don't know what you'd call it, like dad punk, like the Replacements or like Husker Du. And then of course
Yeah.
Prince, but like that's kind of what people think of when they think of the Twin Cities for music. But there are the metal bands, they exist here.
I think um Twin Cities is one of the first places that we played with our buds, and there's this band, a two-piece band called um, Pit Lord, and they are a barbecue themed death metal band. If you haven't checked
Amazing.
them out, you should check them out. I think
I
I
haven't.
they're from I think they're from like Iowa City area, Iowa. But I think they just like happened to drive up and play. It was maybe on the a Legion tour or something. I can't remember
Yeah.
where we played with them, but man, yeah, and it's like, and wherever we played with them was very much like a kind of, not the biggest major city, and like that's one of the funnest local bands or whatever you want to call them that I've ever played with. They were super
Yeah.
tight. It's just a bass player and a vocalist, and then instead of a drummer, they bring up a grill onto the stage, and then the grill has a fog machine in it, and it just bellows out smoke, and they have
Yeah.
just like some of the worst sounding, like intentionally bad sounding drum samples where it just
Yeah.
sounds like, like that first Sky Eats Airplane record of just super clickiness. But then it's actually well written death metal, and
Yeah.
all of their first album's seasonings in the abyss.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
I,
just, yeah, seems like you don't
yeah.
get bands like that from LA.
No, no. And it might be like similar here with in like maybe St. Louis, maybe you share a scene with like Kansas City, but here in Minneapolis, like we have our scene that is our Twin City scenes, but we tend to like borrow from like other like kind of low city, like so like the Fargo, Minneapolis, like Iowa City, and like Milwaukee, all kind
Hmm.
of like we borrow bands from each other. We're kind of like this like little hit in like the northern Midwest.
Yeah, yeah. For us,
Yeah.
it's like Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, and then there's like some like mid like Bloomington, Illinois, and like some
Hmm.
some of like the middle Illinois areas that just have like not necessarily big enough populations to like support their own full scene, but they have like people, and they have people
Yeah.
that want to listen to metal, and it's like those scene. It's the same thing. It's like you get a
Yeah.
lot of bands just like. And bands that will claim St. Louis, and it's like, they're from like 2.5 hours away from here, but this is just like the scene,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like it's a lot of fun, and you get to meet people in a way that like you would never ever meet doing anything else. Like there's no other reason for you to be meeting somebody that lives 2 hours away other than going to a show.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. It's a fun community, and it's not as insular and insulated as like a lot of these major cities where you're only catching like a couple square miles of the population because people just don't travel like or can't like
No.
you go to New York or LA and it's like a lot of people just don't have cars. It's like that's like why would you? I wouldn't.
No.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're needed. The
Yeah.
Midwest.
Midwest. Hell
Yeah.
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 Um. Well, David, I that is about all the questions I have for you. But before I let you go, obviously, I want to let you have the floor for any last words, any plugs. Tell people they can catch your music, sell yourself,
Yeah, for sure. Our album drops under the Reviled Throne. It drops on July 26th. You can get
Yeah,
it anywhere that you can find um, any streaming sites online, any your streaming site of flavor. We have records for sale at summoningthelich.com /merch, and then
yeah,
our label on prostheticrecords.com. They also have records for sale.
for sure.
Also like Amazon and any your local record store. Like if they get death metal, you can so, some I've seen them in the wild, but then like you can also go to your local record store and
Yeah,
request records as well. We do have vinyl. They're flying off the shelf fast. But yeah, check us out. Check out St. Louis bands. Just
yeah.
they're not that hard to find because there aren't that many of us. But yeah, and just keep enjoying death metal, folks, and
Yeah.
go out to shows and love each other and be kind to everybody. Be chill.
Hell
Mind your
yeah.
own businesses, people.
Mind your own fucking business. Well,
Yeah, right.
uh, well, as always, patrons, I love you. Thank you so much for keeping the show alive. David, thank you so much for joining me. Check out Under the Reviled Throne, as David said, July 26th, off of Prosthetic Records. Keep it metal. My name is Maddie, aka Beaver Mosh, signing off.